Okay, so for the first part of our lecture today, we are going to be dealing with shape tweens. So shape tweens are a different kind of tween. So if we go to, this is the little tween key that we have up online. And we've gone over individual keyframes before. That was the bouncing ball, and we've been learning about the classic tween, which we will be coming back to today. But the shape tween. So the shape tween is another kind of tweening. It's very similar to the classic tween, but with a couple of key differences. So the shape tween works by actually altering the shape. It's the only thing it does. You're not going to use the shape tween for any filters or color effect or position or anything. It's just for changing the shape. And it's kind of the only way to have the computer do in-betweens for changing the shape. So here's how it works. I've got it's up online for week 9, but it's a file called shape tween. It's got a couple of different things in here. And we're going to start off with the square, just because it's a little bit easier. And just so you know, so we have a baseline here. This is a drawing object. This does not work with movie clips unless you put the tween inside the movie clip, right? The thing we are tweening is just a regular drawing. Now, I used object drawing when I drew it, so if I come here and we look at my settings, I have object drawing turned on. That means I can move it easily. Things stay together. Pieces don't fly apart. And I tend to use object drawing for almost everything. So we're going to stick with object drawing. So it's going to look like a symbol. It is not a symbol. If you made this into a symbol, this would not work out. So to get set up, excuse me, microphone. So to get set up, we are going to go out to go to 25. It's easier to see. And I've zoomed into my timeline substantially, so we can only see a couple of seconds worth. I used this right here. You should see it somewhere around here. It's basically big mountains, little mountains. And you click the big mountains and we get closer to the animation. Click the little mountains, you get further away from the keys. You can see more frames. And I'm going to usually have this set pretty high so that you all can see what we're doing on the computer screen. Right, so I go to frame 25 and I right click and I insert keyframe. Right, and so on this keyframe I need to make it different. So I'm going to use the subselection tool, click on one of these and move it. Just move it up. Right, so I want this basically to warp from here to here. In order to turn that on, I come over to anywhere between the two keys, I right click, I say create shape tween. You'll notice it's an option now, it hasn't been before, it's been grayed out. And I get this. Now this, for once, is working the way it's supposed to. Don't worry, we'll break it. But this basically allows us to alter the shapes from one to another. And this definitely has some uses. So the 2 out of the 3 little exercises from the book are going to use a shape tween. It is pretty mechanical, right? It is the computer interpolating, what counts as the speed at which to move, and it's not going to be super elegant, but it can have a function. Now, if you're not careful, or rather, technically speaking, if I moved all 4 of these apart equidistantly, it would look exactly like scale. So you just want to make sure you're not using this where something else could be useful. You want to make sure you're not using it where instead you could skew it or scale it or something like that, because it is a little, wibbly wobbly. It doesn't always work, but this is the general idea, right? So we set up keyframe, we set up another keyframe, then we apply the tween, it turns orange, right? This is very much the same as the classic tween, except that it only applies to the shape. It only applies to the path. These anchor points, using the subselection tool, which we have not spent a lot of time with this semester. This is the only thing that it's good for. All right, so that's one that worked. Worked exactly as expected. We're going to turn on the star layer, and then I guarantee we're going to break it. Here's a star. So I'm going to right-click, insert keyframe, and I just realized now that I guaranteed that I'll break it, I won't break it. So I've got my subselect tool, and let's say I wanted to transfer this from a something that was a star to a polygon, or like an inverted star. There we go. So this is usually what I do to break it. So I come out here and I'm taking the inside anchor points and I'm basically unfolding it so that it's a different kind of star. Now you'll note that there's really no way to make this look perfect. There's no good way to like select all these points and scale them equidistant from each other. I just got to kind of like eyeball it. And I keep accidentally doing that. You can set up some guides to help you out, but for the purposes of my demonstration, I promise it won't matter. Right, so we're kind of blowing this up, making it this kind of star, turning it to that kind of star, upside down. So I come over here and I right click and I say create shape tween, and this nonsense happens. See, told you it would break. So this is the computer deciding what counts as the closest anchor point. It does not understand that you want this to stay here and you want this one to move. It doesn't get that. What it's looking at, and I'm going to try and turn on, there we go. So I'm turning on onion skinning to see if I can, aha. Kind of see it. Okay. So when I turn on onion skinning, I can kind of see the pattern this is taking. And what happens is, originally, I'm going to make a new layer and I'm going to grab a little paintbrush action. There we go. And I don't care that the paintbrush is new and improved. Come on. Go away. What happened, what we want to happen, which I will put in yellow, is that there was a point here and we needed to move here. And so it needs to go all the way this way. And we want this point to stay right there. Don't move. That's not what happens. Because computers are dumb. They're smart in a real dumb way. And what they're looking at is, okay, there's a point here. And there's a point there, and there's a point there, and there's a point there. And it looks at where all the points are for one frame. And then it looks at the new frame and says, well, okay, if there's a point here, and then the next frame there's a point here, well, that's closest. Or I lied, actually. It's going here. This is the closest point from here to here. Not this. This is so far away. But this one can move over here. That's not too far, right? Like this distance is shorter than this distance. And this distance is definitely more shorter. It doesn't look at this and say, oh, this one should stay put, this one should move. It says, what's the closest point to where I am? And that's why it does what it does. That if you watch it, it's moving this point from here to here because that's closest. And then because it has to do that, it has to move this point from here to here, and therefore it has to move this point from here to here. And so you can see from the computer's perspective, this is a really good idea because it's efficient. And computers are nothing if not efficient. Now, if we really want this to like, oh, that's weird. The keyframe is gone, and yet it is not gone. Far be it from me to not break this with just panache. Oh, I'm on the wrong layer. Lock. Let's go here. Remove tween. There it is. So one thing we could do to maybe try and fix this is put an in-between in. And you'll see this is the solution in some other places. This has been the solution for getting things to rotate the way we want them to, and other such shenanigans. For heaven's sake. And it sometimes works. I don't know if it's going to work here with only one in between because it's still asking a lot. This is still asking this one to move kind of far. Create shape tween. Turn off onion skinning. Oh! So that one worked, which means can we get this one to work? Negative. So we would need another in between, right? That's the name of the game is hope you like those cleaner alerts because they're going to be up all the time. That's the name of this game. How do we get this to sort of brute force our way, get it to listen to us to have the animation we want? Now, full disclosure, because I know enough about Illustrator, if I had my choice, I would just use that for this because there are tools in there that will allow me to do what I want without all this in-betweeny nonsense. Let's see if it listens to us now. But going from one to the other, no, it doesn't even want to. Wow. It does not want to listen. That transition from going inside to outside, and this will work, right? See, this one will work, but that transition from these points are basically inside to these points are outside, it is not having it. And so that's the transition you would have to step slowly over, is basically how you would get these things to work if you were that desperate, if you really needed this to do this. You will also notice, I mean, I'm kind of doing this messily because I'm talking to you, but if you have enough keyframes in here, one might ask, why not just draw it? One would be correct. Because if you had that many keyframes, why not just draw it? Or have some kind of fade in and out. Because the other trick you can do, if we get rid of this shape tween, is you could have this for a couple frames and this for a couple frames and do some sort of like fade in and out. You know, if this is small and off to the corner, right, there's other options. So when it comes to a shape tween, it's great, it's really cool, very finicky. Very finicky, and it can be difficult to force it to do what you want to do, as evidenced here. This works great. This works great. It had nothing doing. All right, so this one is, again, if we look here, the orange one. If you're in an old version of this program, or if you watch one of my old videos, it's the green one. If you look in your book, it's the green one, unfortunately. It's the only one that doesn't need to be a symbol. It's the only one that doesn't need to be a symbol. It won't give you that error message if it's not a symbol. Put down two keyframes, then set a tween. Understatement of the year that it may not behave properly. And limited utility. So we're learning it because it's useful, but when I say that the classic tween is your workhorse tween, I'm not kidding. But we will have a couple of examples of how to use this. And also in our next video, we're going to be going over eases, which has to do with changing the timing of things. And just know that the stuff we're going over in there will also apply to this kind of tweening. So you can see how it's keyframe, and then set a tween. All the technical things I'm going over in the next video, I'm using a classic tween. They do apply. It's the same set of settings. They do apply here. So another thing to kind of keep in mind is that you can use those settings on this one as well. I just won't be going over it because it's I like to stick with the one tween. All right, but that there is the stubborn and terrible shape tween.